All right. Hello, everyone. This is Sam Shank. I am CEO of Hotel Tonight, and I'm coming at you live from San Mateo from my office here. It is 6 by 6. It was designed as a little space where I could go and do email for a few hours a week. If I'd known I was going to spend 60 hours a week here during quarantine, I probably would have put in a window. That's a lesson learned. And this is my travel map of dots of all the places I've been, and one day get back to traveling, visit those. And for now, though, it's a real pleasure to be coming at you from in this virtual conference space and share some of my thoughts. Thank you, Roger, and the folks at Battery and the folks at the Marketplace Conference for having me. So as background, I'm a serial travel entrepreneur. I've started 3 travel companies, 2 companies that I started before Hotel Tonight that were not successful, but taught me a lot. I wouldn't recommend starting a business in the travel space. It's a very difficult space to build a marketplace in because of low frequency of use. The unit economics are great. The basket size is great. The margins, especially on hotel and lodging, are great, but it's very difficult to get repeat purchase behavior and frequent purchase behavior to develop that pattern of use. And that's why the big companies spend a lot of money with Google still. Um, and let's see, and I Hotel Tonight sold to Airbnb a year ago, and I'm continuing to run Hotel Tonight as well as running the hotels and vacation rentals categories at Airbnb. But today I'm going to talk about my talk is about balancing growth and profitability, 2 things that you may think aren't possible to do together. And I've got some experiences that you hopefully won't have to live through, so you can learn from my mistakes. I'm going to share what I learned from them, and I'm going to share with you a simple framework or simple way of looking at your business that you can use to grow and keep profitability within easy reach. All right, so when you're in growth mode, which is in the early stages of the company, or for a while, probably a decade of the company, you may ask, why is profitability even important? So you've raised money to scale. Now you need to spend it to grow. And if you don't grow, you won't win the category. You won't push your competitors out of the way. You won't get to scale and get the flywheel going. You won't hit your valuation targets and valuation goals. And at this time, your valuation is really going to be based on the amount of revenue, a multiple on revenue, and the growth rate of that revenue. So the conventional wisdom is that profitability can come later. I certainly thought that way during a lot of Hotel Tonight. Well, the problem with this view is that when the unexpected happens, and you need to get to profitability quickly to survive. So this happened at Hotel Tonight when I left the company, or when I let the company run out of money because I was unable to raise a Series E. So, and that we had to scramble, and I'll talk about what we had to do there and how it could have been done better. This situation that I went through was really self-inflicted. It was definitely my responsibility to keep the capital of the company, the necessary capital of the company in order to keep operations going, and I didn't succeed at that. But conversely, the black swan event of COVID-19 is showing us that these situations can happen even to the most well-run companies and require quick pivots. And the concepts here can still be valid, regardless of where your company is or what exactly you think might happen. And then profitability itself is just such a virtue. And being able to get to profitability or have profitability is so powerful. So it means you can control your destiny. You don't have to if things go bad, you don't have to take highly dilutive capital. You don't have to sell your business to lenders for pennies on the dollar, or do all sorts of bad things that really aren't going to be pleasant. And it can also be seen as an anchor that weighs you down and keeps you from growing. So if we're going to be profitable, we can't invest, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think you can have it both ways, and protecting yourself from the unexpected while also reaching for the stars, outdistancing competition, and winning the category. All right, so we're going to go back in time a little bit to 2015. Hotel Tonight was burning millions of dollars a month. We were focused on growth to get to our Series E. We didn't necessarily have good controls on how money was being spent and where the resources were focused, not as good of controls as we should have. And when we saw that we had to get to profitability, it was a lot of work to figure out how to do this. And we had to scramble to know if we even could do this. Um, and I'll talk more about that later. But the idea here and this framework or way of thinking about your business is something that I should have done with HotelTonight, and we should have looked at the business this way. It's easy in hindsight to look at the business this way, and this may be really obvious to you, and it seems very simple. I like simple things, but this may be come across as overly simplistic. Now, that said, it wasn't obvious to me. In the heat of the moment, we were growing fast. We were really reaching to win this category of last minute, on demand, spontaneous hotel bookings. And we got caught up in that. So I'm going to share it with you. So the first way to do this is basically the first step is to cut your business into two sections, two buckets. You've got your core initiatives and your growth initiatives, or your core pieces and your growth pieces. So the core part of the business are the ones that drive revenue with a positive contribution profit. So it means that they make money for you with each booking. So once you take out all the expenses and you get to the bottom line, you're making money there. So if you don't have this at the booking level, then you need to focus on doing this before you do any growth initiatives. Basically, that core portion of the business is your growth initiative, and it's a growth section, and you need to figure that out and get that to a place that's sustaining before you start doing a lot of aggressive growth initiatives. Because it could be that the business is never even going to be profitable ever, and in which case those resources being put into expansion could be all for naught. All right, the next step is looking at the growth initiatives. So these are the ones that drive revenue. So they're focused on top line, but they don't yet have a positive contribution margin on the bottom line. So it's just, these are seeds for future growth. And with this, just as an aside, it's always good to model the amount that you're going to invest, timeline for payoff. Though this typically would be difficult to model the timeline, you should have a hard stopping point on how much you're going to spend. So we're going to spend $1 million to expand into this sub-vertical, or we're going to put $10 million into expanding into Europe, etc. So within each initiative, then create basically two P&Ls, two income statements, the revenue and expenses. And this could be just at the operational level. It can be, it doesn't need to be GAAP accounting. It's probably better that it's not GAAP accounting. It's more cash flow accounting, which means that you're looking at just the actual performance of the business from a transaction perspective. And then allocate your time and your team's time, but don't allocate somebody's time across the two buckets. So, for example, if you have somebody leading HR, if they're working on HR for both the growth initiatives and the core initiatives, you need to put them in the core initiatives bucket and be very disciplined there, and you'll see why. So your overall burn rate, then your overall expenses is going to be the profit from the core and then the loss from the growth operations. And I think it's good to keep this discipline. I ended up, after we decided to look at the business this way, as you'll see, somebody from FP&A, as this was part of their monthly close packet, to basically break these two areas apart. So now, if you need to get to profitability quickly, what you can do is cut back or completely shut down the growth initiatives. And you know exactly where to go, you know exactly what to do, and you know exactly where those costs are. All right, so let's go back to HotelTonight. So what I should have done and what we did with HotelTonight. So at HotelTonight in 2015, we had two big growth areas: international expansion and domestic growth on new customer acquisitions. International expansion, we had a bunch of offices that we added in Europe and in Australia, and we added one in Canada as well, and hired a bunch of really great people. And we also then on domestic growth, we were focused a lot on performance marketing and new channels to find these new customers. So the core business, in comparison, were our domestic travelers that were our core loyalists that came back to the app over and over. Generally, small business, small and medium business travelers. These were our whales. We ended up calling them legends. They booked often once a week. They were traveling, like they were working at agencies. There were we had a whole group of people that were comedians that were using HotelTonight because they didn't know exactly where they were going to get their next booking. And these people were highly profitable to us because they came back directly and they booked frequently. And we had a pretty good margin and a big basket size with travelers. So with hotel bookings. And what we were trying to do with the domestic growth was to really find more of these people. So when we then had to get to profitability, we did one thing or we had to cut these two growth areas. And for the international expansion, we had to say goodbye to a lot of great people, cut almost all marketing internationally, closed a few offices. And for domestic growth, we had just a lot of low efficiency marketing. So we ended up increasing our ROI targets for what we wanted to get out of our marketing spend. So we cut the inefficient spend, and it ended up cutting the marketing budget by about, I think 60%. But surprisingly, the growth didn't go down as much as any of us expected, which just proved that a lot of that spend was unfortunately very inefficient. We also went back and looked at our unit economics and found ways to improve. So this was, going back to the core itself, the core business, and seeing how can that business be better. We increased our margin, the margin that we charged our hotel partners. We reduced our payment processing costs, streamlined our CX, and reduced our AWS costs. We should have been doing that all the time anyway, but this was a time when it wasn't a choice, it was a necessity to do. And what we did is we found this core business to be very resilient, and that those customers, our legends there, didn't realize that the operations had changed at all. The lack of the growth initiatives didn't affect them before, didn't affect them afterwards, and they were still finding value in HotelTonight every day. We were lucky because we ended up having a very resilient core business, and we were lucky because we had two growth areas that we could reduce the expenditures on fairly quickly. Marketing very quickly, and the international offices and international work took longer, but we were still able to do this. So with that, we were able to get to profitability within 9 months. And we were ended up controlling our destiny from that point on, and we're a much stronger and better business as a result of that. That said, it was way harder than it should have been, and it was way more stressful, and it caused a lot of stress on me and on others. And so I certainly wish I had looked at the business this way ahead of time, and I think we would have been able to make quicker decisions. I think we would have been able to also have a better sense of what we were spending on some of these growth initiatives. So in terms of other companies that have looked at this, I think Uber, as I was thinking about this framework, where else have I seen it really nicely applied? A lot of the marketplaces that are that start within a city do a nice job at this. So Uber did a very nice job at this when they started in San Francisco, and then they expanded from there. They got the business working in SF at the city level, expanded from there. Waymo's trying to do the same thing down in Arizona. And certainly haven't expanded from there because they've got, I think, a lot of work to do from what I read. Grubhub also did a very nice job at this. They spent years making Chicago work, and they got Chicago. They basically were the de facto food ordering app before there were apps even. And in Chicago, this was 10, 12 years ago. And then they decided our next step is to replicate our formula here and expand nationwide. But they held on to Chicago, and if the expansion hadn't worked, they would be able to go back to Chicago. Okay, well, thank you very much for giving me a chance to share this. I hope that it's valuable. I hope that it's something that you can deploy yourselves, and you can feel good about the growth that you're putting in, but know that you have profitability to fall back on if needed. It'll make you a stronger company. I think it'll make you a more likely company to raise funds against, and to raise capital. And it'll give you a much stronger business that will generate better returns and will grow faster in the future. Um, and I just say that in general during this time, uh, it's a difficult time for entrepreneurs, a difficult time for the world. But I wouldn't turn away from what the world needs, and the world needs more builders. I hope that you wake up every morning and think about what needs to be built for this time and for times after recovery. I look forward to you going out and making amazing products, amazing marketplaces that change the world, and I look forward to being a customer and a user of them. So thank you very much. All right, I think we're gonna transfer over to some questions. Oops, there we go. Okay, so let's go up to where do you see new opportunities emerging in the travel and hospitality space? Um, so, like I said, travel it's a really tough category for new entrants. I think that the trends right now, but that's the trends right now are around um, closer travel, nearby travel, avoiding crowds, a shift from mass market travel to more bespoke and custom and uncrowded travel. I think the idea of waiting in line to go up the Eiffel Tower and get an Instagram shot with lots of people behind you just doesn't resonate with the world anymore. Um, and so I think that that's something that could be a trend. Again, it's very hard to build a marketplace in travel because of the low frequency of use and the high perceived risk of trying something new. So I definitely recommend entrepreneurs look at other categories that have a higher frequency of use first. Okay, let's see. What would you start if you weren't still running HotelTonight and being happy working at Airbnb? I am very interested and passionate about mobility. I've thought about mobility and moving people around, moving products around for a long time. And I've invested in a few companies that are working on different ways here. I think that mobility is going to change dramatically over the next 10 years, and 20 years. So if I look back on when I was born in the 70s, if you go back in time 40 some years and squint your eyes, the world didn't look very different. I think the buildings have more glass now. The cars are a little more streamlined, but generally, like, streets look the same. If you go forward 40 some years, the world is going to look very different. Streets are going to look very different. Cities are going to look different because we're not going to have human drivers. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to play out over 40 years, but it's going to be hell of a fun ride to try and figure it out. All right. How do you know when it's a good time to turn the growth initiatives back on? Um, So I think it's a good time to turn the growth initiatives back on once you have the capital to do so. So we did turn some growth initiatives back on. We started after we got to profitability. We started investing in new types of marketing to grow our audience and to reach more whales. We did some changes to our invite program to reward the legends that we already had to invite other legends, and we also did a fair amount of out-of-home marketing. And found good returns with that. But again, we had the discipline at that point to say, all right, we're going to dedicate X million dollars to this, and we're going to look for these results. And if that works, we're going to continue doing it. If not, we'll know that we can go back to profitability with this investment will be lost, but we'll at least have the profitability to fall back on. So it's about reinvesting rather your profits at that point. Share how you approached the board BC when you told them you needed to slow down growth. So we'd love to share how you approached the board and our investors when you told them you needed to slow down growth. Were you able to get them on board immediately, or did it take some time? Well, it wasn't so much slowing down growth. It was more about surviving. And the getting them on board with that plan wasn't really much of an option. It was saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. And the painful steps we had to do, pretty large layoffs and say goodbye to wonderful people. And we had to say goodbye to some of the projects that we were really excited about working on. So we made a lot of sacrifices, and we told the board, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to get there. And they were very supportive of us through all of that. And I think that they recognized that we were willing to do and cut deep enough. And I think they're appreciative of that. And I see that, I think where there might have been, or where I see that there's more concern with or conflict or whatever, disagreement, I guess is the right word, between investors and founders that are in these types of situations when the founders aren't willing to cut deeply enough to preserve the capital that they have. Is it true that you created fake accounts of Instagram to tell celebrities, influencers? No, that's Cameo. We did not create any fake accounts. COVID has made us reduce our marketing spend, and now that markets are opening up, we may see a lower CAC. Probably, okay. So those aren't related to me. Do you think that travel will bias towards regional, domestic versus international, global post-COVID? Yes, I do think it will. And I think the reason for that is that people don't want to be on airplanes right now. And I don't want to be on an airplane, frankly. The data is showing that the way that people are, and the CDC is saying that the way that you're contracting COVID is by being around other people. It's really person to person is the spread. So the way to avoid COVID is to avoid crowds. A confined space with lots of people, like a plane, doesn't sound like it's along those lines. So what we're going to see is people are really excited about traveling, and they're really excited about traveling domestically. It's going to be by car, and it's going to be, the Great American Road Trip this summer, I think, will be something that we see come back. And likewise in other countries, like in Europe, it'll be, once those borders reopen and travel restrictions are eased, there'll be a lot of intra-Europe travel, but not a lot of international travel. This isn't the year to jump on a plane and go stay in Cartagena, but there are a lot of great options and a lot of great places to explore in your own backyard. You mentioned you increased ROI targets. Did you focus on organic initiatives? Did you share a few examples that worked? Yeah, we one of the other things that we did was, well, we increased our ROI targets basically to be profitable on a first transaction basis, which really cut the amount of marketing that we spent, but guaranteed a payback. Over time, we loosened that up as we got more information about how many people through various channels would come back for a second booking, and we did an LTV, or a lifetime value, of that customer for a year. And it ended up being about 2 bookings, which is common for the industry. Some channels didn't give us more than 1 booking, even over a year. They were more transactional, like MetaSearch, for example. But other channels did give us pretty good results. So you have to look at it by channel for sure. And let's see, the next would be, we also said goodbye to a lot of sacred cows at HotelTonight, things that we were very, very rigid on. So one was, for example, bringing in third-party inventory. So we started working with others that had inventory and add hotels that we could put as bookable onto HotelTonight. And this allowed us to have hotels in places where we didn't have hotels before. People would be coming to HotelTonight looking for Abilene, Texas, because they were on a road trip. We didn't have anything there, which wasn't good for our customers. And so what we did was we ended up working with them. It was an easy decision when we were focused on profitability. It was a controversial decision before. So, well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciated being here, and go forth and build great things. Thank you.